The 2022 Baseball Hall of Fame ballot features many legends of the game, and there will be no shortage of controversy after the results are revealed. The headliners debuting on the ballot are Alex Rodriguez and David Ortiz.
Ortiz to right field. It is gone! David Ortiz, the newest member of the 500 Club.
While Big Papi is most likely a shoo-in, the case for A-Rod is much more complicated.
The 2-0. There it is! Number 600, Alex Rodriguez.
His production is matched by few who have ever played the game, but as with many in that era, rumors of PED use followed him consistently in the tail part of his career, which culminated in that year-long suspension for the 2014 season. But another big storyline to follow is if Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Curt Schilling can garner past the 75% threshold to enter the Hall of Fame in their 10th and final years on the ballot.
And Bonds hits right high. Hits it deep. It is out of here. 756.
In the case of Bonds, if you ask some, they'll say he's the greatest player that's ever played the game. Others think that his home run record shouldn't count due to PED rumors that followed much of his career with the Giants.
Here's the pitch. Swing and a miss. Hook the lights out.
As for Clemens, he's currently the only 300-game winner who's not in the Hall of Fame. But like Bonds, he spent the latter years of his career defending himself against PED use. Unlike Bonds or Clemens, Schilling was never tied to PED use and is one of the most clutch postseason pitchers of all time.
Another 2-2. Sierra strikes out.
And after falling 4% short on last year's ballot, he requested to be removed from the 2022 ballot, a request which was denied. Who will be inducted into Cooperstown, and who will be on the outside looking in? The 2022 inductees are about to be revealed.
So today is baseball's version of Last Chance U, except we'll call this one Last Chance Hall. As Jeremy St. Louis laid out so well, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, and Curt Schilling get one more shot at the Hall of Fame. And don't forget, Sammy Sosa's on the final year of the ballot. One more swing for him. It could be a swan song for a fearsome foursome at one point in time. And again, all of those guys will not appear on the 2023 ballot. Those are the last-timers, and then there are the first-timers. Big names that headline this list include David Ortiz and Alex Rodriguez. Ortiz, Big Papi, will have a good case. A-Rod's a little bit more unpredictable. Still can't be sure about all those votes revealed, but sort of polling suggesting not even going to crack the top 50 there, maybe not even 40, so worth keeping an eye on there for A-Rod. So here's a look at that notable list. According to predictive analyst Ryan Thibodeau, his projections will have Ortiz in comfortably at 84.6%. Then it shows two of the big three would get in, but just barely. Bonds at 77.7%. Clemson just above that 75% threshold by 1.6%, with Curt Schilling. Last year, you may recall, 71.1%, but the projection here is just over 60. All right, we're bringing the best, Jim Bowden, to break this down, a front office insider, CBS Sports HQ. Jim, if someone's sort of just parachuting into this conversation right now and is asking you why David Ortiz is in a better position than others, what would that answer be?
Well, because David Ortiz never tested positive on any legal tests for PEDs. Any accusation that he's had, he has denied it, and there's really no real proof or evidence that he ever used PEDs. And a lot of the players that you were just talking about, Alex Rodriguez, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, are in a much different category. So Big Papi, to me, is going to be the only one that is going to be voted into the Hall of Fame today. I think it's going to be very close, but I think he's going to get in. And Tommy Tran, I think it's only fitting because in a year where I believe the universal DH will be implemented in the next CBA, I think it's only fitting that we have the only player maybe in the Hall of Fame in 2022 being a DH. But Boston Strong, Big Papi, David Ortiz deserves it. This is one of the most popular players in the game. Nobody has more players in their iPhone than Big Papi, who's been a mentor to young players on all 30 teams. And it'll be well-deserved when it's finally announced.
All right, if Ortiz does get in first ballot entry, joining four other Red Sox to do so, Pedro Martinez, Carl Yastrzemski, Ted Williams, Wade Boggs, certainly a list of lists there, both in Red Sox lore and Hall of Fame lore as well. We'll take a look at A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez tracking numbers. Jim, how do you evaluate that? Do you think they're low, high, or just about right?
No, they're low, and Alex Rodriguez is not getting in the Hall of Fame this year, next year, the year after, or quite frankly, for the next 10 years, he's not getting in. If Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens don't get in the Hall of Fame, Alex Rodriguez has no chance for the 10-year period. And the main reason for that is he tested positive, he lied about it, he got suspended for it, and if you're not going to let Clemens or Bonds in, there's no chance that A-Rod gets in. So he's going to have a tough 10 years looking on the outside in like Bonds and Clemens.
All right, so you've made it very clear you think David Ortiz is the only one to get in, but we do have to talk about the guy specifically again. Give me a sense of what the baseball community thinks, what fans think, and we'll start with why no on Barry Bonds.
Well, I'll start with this. In my opinion, Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, and I think the writers are making a mistake. Barry Bonds is the best player that I've ever seen with my naked eyes. I was a GM for 16 years. I've been in the game for decades. I've never seen a better hitter. I've never seen a better power hitter. I've never seen an overall better player than Barry Bonds. And to not have him in the Hall of Fame is a joke. This is the best player of the era. Now, look, I understand that he admitted to unknowingly having a PED. I personally believe he did PEDs, but I'll also say this. I think there are multiple players who are in the Hall of Fame right now that did PEDs in the same era that Barry Bonds did. Do I think his numbers are inflated because of PEDs? Absolutely. But do I think he was still the best player over that time period, whether he was taking them or not? I absolutely do. So I'm disappointed that 10 years later, he didn't get in. To me, it's a museum, so I want him in there. But the reality is what it is. The only way he gets in now is if the Veterans Committee decides to vote him in later on down the road.
What about Roger Clemens?
Roger Clemens, same situation. It's interesting because Congress spent millions of dollars to try and convict Roger Clemens, and they couldn't do it. And so, to me, I looked at it that I don't have the positive test. I don't have the conviction. This is one of the best pitchers of his time. How are we not putting him in? Now you're going to ask me the next question is, do you think he did PEDs? And I'm going to say, absolutely I do. Do I think it affected his performances in a positive way? Absolutely I do. That doesn't take away that in his career, whether he was doing it or not, he was the best player of the time. And the problem is the era. The problem is that entire generation of players, most of them or a lot of them were doing PEDs. We'll never know exactly who did and who didn't. So my preference is put the best players in, but put them in with all the stories that surrounded that era, the Balco report, whatever test came back positive. That's what I would rather see them do. But that's not what's going to happen after a decade.
Finally, with Curt Schilling, I'm going to spin it slightly there. How much do you think today's result is a reaction to him openly wanting to be left out after last year?
I think it's everything. I mean, he was 16 votes short a year ago, Tommy Tran, and he was going to get those 16 votes this year, and he was going to get in on his final year, and he shot himself in the foot when he said, take me off the ballot. I do think he gets in the Hall of Fame from the Veterans Committee, just like Jack Morris and Burt Blyleven did. With the bloody sock or without, he deserves to be a Hall of Famer because of what he did in the postseason, his dominance in winning world championships. So I think Schilling gets in. I worked with Curt at Baseball Tonight for ESPN for many years. Big fan of his work. I don't agree with a lot of his views, and I think it's his political views that had more to do with him not getting in than anything else. He continues to shoot himself in the foot, and that's why he's on the outside looking in. But like Blyleven and Morris, I think eventually the Veterans Committee will put him in. All
right, we spent a lot of time talking about these 5 players, and deservedly so. But if I were to ask you a player eligible for the Hall of Fame now but not getting enough respect, who would that player be?
There's one that really stands out to me, and that is Andrew Jones, the center fielder of the Atlanta Braves. Andrew Jones is the greatest defensive center fielder I ever saw in my life. And I had a long debate with the late Frank Robinson on who was the best center fielder ever. And when we got done that argument or that debate, Frank Robinson said this to me: let's put Andrew Jones as 1A and Willie Mays as 1B. And that's enough for me to put him in the Hall. You wouldn't have Glavine, Smoltz, and Maddox with the ERAs and numbers they had if Andrew Jones wasn't taking away the singles in front of him, the doubles in the gaps, the homers over the wall. There's never been a center fielder like him. Never saw one. A lot of great ones I saw. Jim Edmonds, Finley, a lot of great ones. Nobody even in the ballpark of Andrew Jones. And Ozzie Smith got in at shortstop because he was the greatest defensive shortstop of all time. Andrew Jones must get in. And remember, this is a player that never, ever, ever was connected to PEDs.
Jim, certainly appreciate it. We'll see how it all unfolds later today. Again, Jim Bowden with some quality baseball time. Taking a look at some notable guys in the 2023 first-time ballot. Carlos Beltran, Matt Cain of the Giants. An interesting note there with Francisco Rodriguez, Houston Street, a couple of big league type of relievers and closers. It'll be interesting, the 5% threshold of guys that will remain on the list, of course, if they don't get through. Big Poppy, the big story today. We anticipate, and listen from Jim, that David Ortiz, the only one that gets in after today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.